All right, welcome back to Bayou Time. I'm Martin Falls. Very pleased to have with us Chuck Bourque, a local attorney, also an aviation expert in this field. We're going to talk about a helicopter emergency landing that took place 6:14 p.m. on Saturday, September 24th at the Houma airport. Fire department was dispatched, and we figured we want to bring in our expert because in these situations, maybe we could puzzle it together. Chuck, how are you today?
I'm good, Martin. How you doing?
Pretty good. So when we're dealing with emergency landings, we saw the fact that aircraft had 6 people on board, and we saw that our fire department, we could bring a couple of pictures up if we can, showing you and depicting this emergency landing that took place. There you see, looks pretty serious to me. What's your assessment? I'm sure you've heard a few things about it. Give me your take on it.
Well, what we're hearing, Martin, is that there was some smoke in the cockpit. The aircraft itself is known as an Augusta or an AW-139. It's used for transporting personnel to and from offshore oil platforms. Mm-hmm. It's a twin-engine helicopter. Like a lot of these modern-day helicopters, a lot of your systems and controls are run by electronics. So the initial reports that I had heard was that there was some type of electronic fire, or fire in the electronic system, and that there was smoke in the cockpit. So when you have that fire, you may not be able to have as much control over the engines and over the speed of the engines. So what you'll find is instead of trying to come in and land it to a hover, where like a lot of helicopters you see and they come down at the bottom and they stop and they hover, that takes a lot more control. Mm-hmm. It's looking like whatever was going on with this helicopter, they came in and tried to do what's called a run-on landing. So land it more like a traditional airplane. So you see in that picture that's up now, it looks like they wind up going off the runway. So if you had the fire, and the fire impacted the electronics in the aircraft, which again would be the reason why you'd have smoke, would be from the fire, and if the electronics is then burning, then you may have control issues with the helicopter.
Let me ask you this. So what happens now when, of course, it's very serious whenever you have 6 people on board, you send out a full alarm assignment, you have 2 engines, 1 ladder, and a chief there trying to get things into, order. What happens now? Does somebody else come in and an investigation pursues?
So you'll have a couple of government agencies at this point. The FAA, every commercial operator has what's called a POI, or Principal Operations Inspector. FAA will have somebody come out. The overall and accident investigation will be done by the National Transportation Safety Board. So they're going to look to find out what happened. So both as to why was there a mechanical failure, to the extent that's what led to the fire, and then they'll look at the actions of the pilots in getting the aircraft on the ground.
Let me ask you this. Is it pretty cut and dry when you go out and you see a crash like this on emergency landing? Is it easy to piece the thing together, or is it sometimes it's very difficult?
Sometimes it can be very difficult. And that's one of the things that we see. We've been involved with a number of aviation accidents in this area. So the one thing, though, is the NTSB does a pretty good job with getting the computers off of the aircraft, getting what's remaining of the aircraft. And in this case, it looks like the airframe itself is pretty much in one piece. The landing gear looks like it collapsed, but a lot of the electronics and computers that will save data don't appear to have been damaged, as would be as if there was a fire.
Does a helicopter, excuse my ignorance here, does a helicopter have a black box?
Helicopter will have a black box that'll record what's going on, what was happening with the engines, what the computers were saying as it went in. So one of the reports you heard, or we heard, was that the helicopter circled the airport a couple of times before it landed. That happens a lot when you have problems with the controls, which are related to electronics. Mm-hmm. The pilots will kind of fly around when they get close to the airport and do certain tests to see how the aircraft was going to respond.
I would imagine by looking at the way that aircraft landed, would you say it's a pretty good job by the pilot getting that thing down?
Again, not knowing what happened to get to that point, I would say yes, because again, if if they were truly having control issues, to get it on the ground basically in one piece. Looks like they might have been a little hard at the bottom end. It looks like they gave it their best effort and did a good job.
Yeah, and it just always sort of baffled me about helicopters. Is that a common fear that, I mean, some people are scared to fly in planes, but people are scared to fly in helicopters because they think it's an automatic up and down, but that's not really the case, is it?
No, and that's Martin, you and I have talked about it before. With if you have an engine failure in a helicopter, if the engines go out altogether, a helicopter can do what's called an auto rotation. And when they're done properly, an auto rotation with the engines fail altogether, you can land the helicopter almost as smooth as if you were coming in to do a regular landing. Again, in this case, it appears that there wasn't an engine failure, but there were malfunctions in the engines, and they may have had trouble controlling the speed of the engines and the controls that allow you to make the aircraft turn left, turn right, go up and down. So it was probably actually a little more, from what I'm seeing, it might have been even more complicated than if you had an engine failure.
All right, we look forward to seeing the investigation as it pursues to get a handle on what took place. But again, we appreciate you coming on and giving us your expertise on that.
It's good talking to you today, Martin, and glad to have a chance to come over here and share my knowledge with you.
All right, there you have it, Chuck Bourque, local attorney here in the area, aviation expert, and we call on him from time to time to give us the scoop or his perception on things that take place. We'll take a short break. We'll be back with a lot more. Don't go away.